Witch fashion. Let's talk about it. Hey, it's Sally and I'm back with a video for the spooky season. Why do witch costumes look like this? Where do pointy hats come from? How did we get from this to this? Today I'm going to take you on a journey through the history of witch fashion, all the way from the medieval and early modern period through to the 21st century. I want to state quickly that I'm talking about witches in popular culture, so things like art, fashion, film and TV. Depictions of witchcraft vary around the world, but because of American and Western cultural dominance, the idea of a Western witch is recognisable to billions. Strap in, get a hot drink, light some candles. As usual, your room is probably messy, so you can tidy that whilst I chat you through this. It'll be fun. As always, send this to your best friend so you can talk about it. And without further ado, let's get into it. So you might think I'd be starting around here, but first I need to take you even further back. What did OG witches look like? Through art, we can gain an understanding of what people perceived witches to look like in the medieval and early modern period. Want to take a guess? Well, witches were first depicted in the Western world as being entirely... This was believed to be their main mode of dress, or maybe undress. There was a lot of artwork made in the 14th to 17th century which depicted witches in this way. Take this artwork. This depicts a group of nude witches. There are also some other notable features. For example, the women wear their hair free and long, which was contrary to the times. But why did artists present witches in the nude? Witches were depicted in this way largely because of connections between witchcraft and paganism. Paganism was very connected to the natural world and to magic. Some, though not all, pagan rituals involved nudity. All of this tied together into art showed us a lot about societal fears, about magic, the supernatural, and the sensual. In 1486, the Malleus Maleficarum, which was a book outlining the criminalisation and identification of witches, was produced and spread like wildfire around Europe. This book created a pivotal shift towards how the law and wider society perceived witches. It's incredibly dense, and as this video is focusing more on clothing, I'm not going to get into it too deeply. One thing it did bring into the wider culture is the depiction of witches flying on brooms, and that still very much persists in Halloween culture and costume today. So where the hell did that idea come from? Brooms. It's still kind of uncertain. Some sources attribute this link between witches and broomsticks as presenting an inversion of female domestic life, because broomsticks would have been ever present in these women's homes. Other sources link it to a pagan harvest ritual where people would dance with broomsticks between their legs in order to encourage their harvest to grow. Despite not fully having an answer to this, the image of a witch holding a broom really persists to this day. Let's get back to clothing. The classic witch clothing. Here's a big question. What did witches actually wear to make them look like witches? Well, the answer to that is complicated. Because of the impact of the Malleus Maleficarum, lots of visual descriptions of witches became widespread. These descriptions often had to do more with physical features rather than the clothing that witches wore. A good example is having moles, birthmarks, or visual deformities. Obviously, this is so problematic, but at the time, those marks meant that you were connected to the devil in some way. But again, what about clothes themselves? We didn't get here from nothing. I quickly want to shout out an essay called Witches' Weeds, which outlines clothing in this period, as well as a Costume Society article called Fashioning Witchcraft. These really helped me out in this section. Let's give you a quick run through. Stick with me, it's super interesting. In the early modern period, we know that witch trials became extremely commonplace in the Western world. More often than not, the people who were brought to trial were from the lower classes. So as a result, the clothing that became associated with witchcraft was actually just the clothing that primarily lower class women were wearing. These were things like wool coats, aprons, and bodices which were worn over shifts. I also love a bonnet or headpiece moment, but that just hasn't really come through to 21st century witch depictions. Okay, here's the main point. Why would women want to dress in a way that identifies them as witches if they risk literally being killed. So there wasn't a real witch outfit at the time. The reason you're wearing those old-timey witch costumes isn't because that's what witches in particular wore, but because it's the general clothing from the time where witch hunts and witch trials were at their peak. Let's pivot quickly. This doesn't mean that people at the time didn't think that clothing could be associated with magic. The Costume Society lays out some cool, or maybe cruel, tidbits about this. Fear of textile workers. There was a cultural belief that female textile workers had links to magic. This was perpetuated by King James I's book Daemonology, a treatise against witchcraft. I was actually thinking about this a lot, and you hear phrases like weaving spells or she's a spinster a lot, even in our common language today. And of course that comes from cloth making terminology. I just think that's brilliant. I think it's so cool. Clothes holding magic. There was a belief that clothing could hold magic, so there are also cases of witches' clothes being burned after they were tried and dyed. There were also cases of witches being forced to wear new clothes, sometimes with holy water sprinkled on them. So that's clothing in this period, but witch hats. How could I forget? Now, everyone knows that there's no stronger witch symbol in the modern world than the pointy hat. Where do the hats come into it? Where did they come from? Well, this might be even more interesting, and I know just the place to show you this. Surprise trip, let's go. Look at this painting. To our modern eyes, we'd immediately think witch, but we'd be very wrong. This actually shows a woman called Mrs. Salisbury, and she's not a witch at all. Okay, I'm back. For an in-depth look at the witch's hat, I'd highly recommend this video, but I'll present a quick history based on what I discovered in the gallery. And as I said, that's not a witch, that's Mrs. Salisbury. Those hats were just super in fashion in the late 1600s. The trend of the pointy hat extended across all walks of life. But the explanation as to why this is associated with witchcraft now is a little bit more complicated than that. It actually has a lot to do with Quakers. A bit about Quakers. Quakers at the time allowed women to have their fair share in power at the church. In some cases, they even allowed them to become ministers. Now, what do we know about men in this period who come across an assertive woman?
Instant witchification.
Did she talk to me? Did she have an opinion on something? I don't understand how that would happen. She's obviously a witch. Society became very unaccepting of how Quaker women lived their lives. This created a satirical art niche where Quaker women were depicted in often quite horrible ways, and in terms of clothing, they would wear black clothing and, you guessed it, pointy hats. But wait, if pointy hats were in fashion for everyone, then why is it only Quaker women getting the smoke? Well, the short answer is fashion trends move on, but Quaker women didn't follow those trends at the same rate. Quakers were very traditional, so they stayed dressed in this way for way longer than the rest of society did.
Vintage. So adorable. Thanks.
So, due to anti-Quaker sentiment and the amount of witchy satirical art that exists from this period of women wearing pointy hats, the pointy hat still represents a pivotal part of traditional witch clothing. Okay, so now we have the diagram of the witch sorted. We have the clothing, the hat, and the broomstick. Let's see how it trickled down into 19th and 20th century pop culture, all the way through to today. 19th century pop culture. In 19th century pop culture, we see a real interest in the occult, and on top of that, because of new technologies, art is a bit more accessible to all, so we're seeing wider depictions of these art pieces from the past. From this, we see a wave of popular Gothic novels centered on witchcraft and the occult. Witches are depicted in this time in sort of an amalgamation of different fashions from the past. So you're seeing some of that pagan fashion come through, as well as sort of witch trial era clothing, and kind of touching on those Quaker satirical art niches with the pointy hat. This helps to set witches apart from fashions of their present day. Halloween. After the 1840s, we see the first celebrations of Halloween in the modern sense. There are many origins to this holiday, tracing as far back as the 7th century. It's linked to a Christian holy day called All Hallows Day, All Saints Day, or All Hallowtide, which is still celebrated in a lot of countries on the 1st of November. That makes the day before, the 31st of October, All Hallows Eve, which then becomes a mishmash word, Halloween. All Hallows Eve was primarily brought to the Americas by Irish and Scottish immigrants in the 19th century. The mishmash of cultures in America's melting pot made dressing up on Halloween a cultural practice around the world. In Germany and Scandinavian culture, this practice was called mumming. People would wear masks and costumes, walk the streets in them, or go to people's houses to dance or play games. In Ireland and Scotland, there was guising. This is where children would go door to door in costume to ask for food or money. The earliest use of the term trick or treat was only in 1927. And what were popular costumes at the time? Pretty much the same as today. Vampires, ghosts, skeletons, and you guessed it, witches. Halloween really helped us to solidify that traditional witch clothing. In the early 20th century, people were bored of just hearing about bad witches. It was overdone. So we start getting different stories about witches. Good witches, white witches, witches worthy of love and respect. This is the point where we start to see diverse clothing for witch characters in fashion history. In the essay Witches' Weeds, Pat Troutman points to the beautiful and elegant illustrations of the 1900s version of The Wizard of Oz. Troutman also cites the beginning of Disney really impacting witch fashion going forward. Disney really loved cloaks and capes as part of witch fashion. This popularized cloaks and capes becoming part of that bodice, pointy hat and broom witch outfit combo. It's giving very much hocus pocus costume design. So now loads of costumes are based around this more Disney-fied image. Witch fashion in the modern day. Now I couldn't make this video without talking about the whimsigothic or whimsigoth 90s fashion. This is having a huge comeback and I do really love it. If you've seen my fairycore video, you'll know that 90s fashion ushered in a huge range of fashion movements, many of which were inspired by the hippie movement of the 60s and 70s. This brought in a preoccupation with pagan traditions and peasant-style fashion, things that centered on the natural world and the universe. Out of this, we saw a lot of fashion that seemed laid back, but also really celestial. We saw star, moon, and sun motifs. Key materials include velvet, wool, and shit clothing. New colors like purple, blue, and green become witchy. The whimsical elements are balanced out with more gothic pieces like big chunky boots and pentagram necklaces. It gives us a really cool overall look and feel. Being witchy became cool. It was kind of more like a superpower than something inherently villainous. The whimsigoth aesthetic is back in a big way. It's also good to point out that we are back in a time where saying you're a witch is kind of acceptable and cool, rather than obviously centuries ago when that sort of stuff could get you killed. For more inspo on the whimsigoth aesthetic, you should definitely watch shows like Sabrina the Teenage Witch and Charmed, films like Practical Magic, and for things that dip more into the gothic elements, you have to watch The Craft. The fashion in The Craft is absolutely incredible. Let's quickly shout out some more 21st century witch fashion that I loved. American Horror Story Coven. It absolutely cannot be understated how much of an impact Coven had on internet subcultural fashion in this era. You could not go a day on Tumblr without seeing a still or an outfit from that show. It's absolutely one of the best known 21st century depictions of witch costuming. The all black looks worked really well in the monochrome, minimalistic, soft grunge era that we were in. It also posed as a new interpretation of witches that was slightly further away from that 90s whimsigoth fashion. I also love the idea that they still kept the witch's hat as a concept, but transformed it to the modern day. I'd highly recommend taking a look at the fashion in that show if you want more modern, minimal, witchy inspo. The Love Witch. If you haven't seen The Love Witch yet, then you absolutely have to. I'm obsessed with the costume design. It takes inspiration from a sweeping range of fashion movements. It has a romantic and vintage feel and is not afraid of a vibrant colour palette. I know Miss Lana Del Rey was shaking, crying, throwing up when this film hit screens. And that's kind of it. I really hope you enjoyed this deep dive into witch fashion. Please let me know what your favourite witchy book, TV show, art piece or film is. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and send it to someone you think would like it too. I just want to say I super appreciate the people who've been watching my channel for a while, and I'm really excited about the community that we're building here. I love autumn and I have so many videos coming up for the rest of the season. I'm gonna love you and leave you all now. Enjoy spooky season, and I'll see you in my next video.